We have spent 6 months digging, reviewed tens of documents, spoken to officials to uncover what really is behind the ghost health centers of Ntungamo district.
Going to a press called Guabarata, but in that area there is not even a drug shop.
We think we have the smoking gun.
Is there in your community a health center called Guabarata Health Center 4?
No, we have the village fair.
These people are on the payment side, but they don't appear on the payment.
For years, the district has been operating with over 20 ghost health centers with people paid on government payroll. Yet the residents are not aware of these health centers.
Konkara Barata Health Center for Mujimani. Tena yangu jamanya. Mujikurorako. Nikajura hoga no kujura na jura ni kujikana.
It never existed during my time of work.
Government has lost billions of shillings through this financial hemorrhage.
Because they are the ones that constructed this company, and they shouldn't have paid this company.
We now know who is responsible for manipulating the system. We cast a spotlight on the ghosts of Ntungamo.
Welcome to yet another special edition of ACFIM Talks. Today we are going to look at the untold story of the ghosts of Ntungamo, and in a short while I'll be introducing our guest, the person behind that documentary. But before we start, I would encourage everybody to join us. We are live on our YouTube channel, ACFIM Africa. That's where you can catch us, but you can also be part of the conversation on our social media platforms, on our Twitter handle, which I think apparently now it's called X, but our Twitter handle is ACFIM Africa, and so is our Facebook, it's also called ACFIM Africa. So you can get us there and be part of this very interesting and interactive show today, the 4th of August, 2023. My name is Felix, and I'm the host for ACFIM Talks, and the title is The Untold Story of the Ghosts of Ntungamo. And with me, I have Solomon Serwanja, who is joining us, and he is the award-winning investigative journalist and the executive director of the African Institute for Investigative Journalism, famously known as AIIJ. Is also the brainchild and the lead investigator behind this interesting investigative piece, The Ghosts of Ntungamo. Solomon, you're most welcome.
Thank you, Felix. Thank you for having me.
It's great. It's a pleasure to have you. And again, apologies to our listeners for starting a little late. We had a little bit of hiccups, but it's never late. Here we are. And I think it's important that we quickly dive deep and redeem the time. So, Solomon, I know that you've now settled in. And I know you were behind this interesting investigative documentary, where you came up close and personal with the ghosts of Ntungamo, if I may put it that way. It would be interesting if you shared with us your experience, especially what was running in your head when you came across the findings in Ntungamo concerning the ghost health centers in a place that is the birth district of the president and the first lady, Janet Museveni.
All right. Once again, thank you, Felix, for having me on the show today. Let me start with how did this story actually come about? What was the mindset behind this story? We know that the president, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, Uganda's president, set up the State House Health Monitoring Unit, whose mandate is really to look at the service delivery in the health sector. And what we saw was a headlining story in a government newspaper, which is the New Vision, that was speaking to government losing about 50 billion shillings from ghost health workers. And at that time, I think they were in preliminary stages of the investigations. So this was quite shocking for us. The story did not go deep. For some of you who have been in the newsroom, we look at daily news stories and we use them as anchors for investigations. So we felt like that was a whistleblower. The story wasn't deep, and we decided to say, look, why can't we take a deep dive into the story and get to the bottom of it? How come actually government is losing 50 billion shillings from ghost health centers? Now, what it took to do this story was a journey that we spent about 6 months digging deeper, having different hiccups here and there. But eventually, we managed to go past all the hurdles and put out a very good investigation. For some of you here on the show who haven't had an opportunity of watching it, I would encourage you to go and watch it. It's online. You can just tap in The Ghosts of Ntungamo. Last time I checked, it was about 49,000 views with over 700 comments. Hopefully, that through these comments, this story will go beyond just being published to live a life of its own, to empower Ugandans to actually go out there and demand for accountability for the money that we have lost out of facilitating ghost health workers, overpayment, and the entire corruption that encapsulates public service, especially in Ntungamo district, which is the first district. So where did we start from? Felix, I think it's important for us to say that investigative journalism is evidence-based. It's not allegations. It's not he said, she said. Whatever you have to say, you have to add a touch of evidence to, you know, to your statement. And so we went out with a hypothesis that they are ghost health centers based on the tip-off from the story that was published in the New Vision as a result of the State House preliminary investigations. So first of all, we had to look for evidence collection, and we needed to triangulate data from the payroll in Ntungamo with the data from the Ministry of Health that speaks about the health centers that are known to the Ministry of Health in Ntungamo. We also looked at the National Medical Stores data. So our assumption was, how come there are ghost health centers, first of all, that they exist? We also had a question, do these ghost health centers receive medicines? And if so, where does this medicine go? We also wanted to ask, if these medical ghost health centers exist, are there people who are being paid under these medical centers? We also had questions of, how did they even come up? So we went into this investigation with research questions. Investigative journalism is just like writing a research paper. You go into it with hypotheses and research questions. So these were the questions that we're trying to really cover in this investigation. So our methodology was triangulation. So when we got the Ministry of Health master list that speaks about all the ghost health center, all the health centers in Ntungamo district, and juxtaposed it with the payroll of Ntungamo district, and also juxtaposed it with the National Medical Stores disbursement lists, we then decided to follow through. Now, what did we find? We found that there were more health centers on payroll compared to what the Ministry of Health master list knows. In other words, these data sets were not speaking to each other, because anyway, they're supposed to speak to each other. So we saw this inconsistency, and that raised the red flag. How come that the payroll has so many health centers that the Ministry of Health does not know about? And so what we decided to do then is we started to tick off, there is this health center, it is not on the Ministry of Health master list. It is also not on the National Medical Stores list. This one exists, this one doesn't exist, this one doesn't exist. And what we saw is, we saw that there were extra 20 health center 4s in Ntungamo. There were extra health center 3s and extra health center 2s that had people who were paid on the payroll, but the Ministry of Health doesn't know about it, and they actually do not receive National Medical Stores drugs, medicines from the NMS. And so that really was the fundamental grounding of this investigation. So when we saw that these data sets were not speaking to each other, we decided to dig deeper. The question we're having is, how come that these ghost health centers only exist on payroll? Because NMS does not know about them, the Ministry of Health does not know about them. And so we then started to laser focus on the payroll. Now, we took some time and studied the payroll in detail, and we then decided to say, this story cannot end on just using the methodology of triangulation of the data. It required us to actually go on the ground. So we listed down all these ghost health centers, and then we decided to go to Ntungamo district, where we spent quite some time trying to understand this. When we got to Ntungamo district, we sampled out about 3 of them, and we went to these sub-counties where these health centers are supposed to be. And we spoke to the residents. We asked them, do you know about these health centers? And they said, we actually do not know, but this is where we receive treatment from. If you've watched the investigation, one of the LC3 leaders then took us to a health center 2 where they are receiving medication. Now, please note that Ramwanja Health Center 2 is in Ruhama County, which is the constituency where the First Lady stays and where she used to represent the people of Ntungamo. When this LC3 took us to the health center 2, where they're receiving treatment, first of all, we did not find medical workers on ground, and it was a weekday. So we did not find medical people there. We found the OPD open, but the pharmacy was closed, and the medical staff were not on ground. And so we then go to ask, how come there are no medical workers here and it's supposed to be a working day? So this story went beyond just investigating the ghost health centers, but it went to service delivery. Now, the chairman of LC3 told us, we have struggled with pregnant women because the nearest health center is Health Center 3 and Health Center 4, which is so far away. Actually, it was Health Center 4. So he said, we have to get women and put them on a border and drive for kilometers to go there. Now, he also mentioned to me that they normally do group medical workers from the Health Center 4 come and do some visits once in a month. Think of it like a camp. So they come and do a camp for 1 month and then they go back. And sometimes those camps don't actually also come. So he really went deep to explain how difficult it was to access medical treatment. I think it's from there that he said, we used to use this, he wanted to show me the ambulance that they use to actually transport, that they used to use to transport the patients to the nearest health center. And like you heard in the film, he said it was donated by the First Lady, but it was living in the shadow of its past. Broken, dilapidated, and in a mud, wattled house in there. And I couldn't believe my eyesight about what I really was seeing. But the tail end of it is that this health center wasn't existent in the sub-county, and we sampled 2 extra and they were not there. And so we wanted to understand then how come there are people who are being paid on payroll under these health centers. And so what we did is we then went to the district and tried to ask some questions. And I think the first one was, this docket falls with the district health officer. And so we tried to convince her to speak to us, which she agreed. And we had a conversation with her. And she said, look, I know that these ghost health centers exist, but I raised the issue and they told me to keep quiet. This is how things run. But the staff who work on under these ghost health centers exist. So I said, so if they exist, then why don't you put them and align them to the health centers where they work and where indeed they are supposed to be earning from? And they say, she told me, that's not my business, that's business of cow and human resource, because that's payroll. It became more interesting. Then, then I had to, get sources who I spoke to, who actually told me, look, this story, this is how things have been over the last 10 years. Yes, we know that it is wrong, but this is how the system has been. So my next question was, if you've known that they've been happening for the last 10 years, why haven't you settled it? Like, why haven't you cleared the mess, swept your house clean and made sure that that things are sorted? Now, what we then found out is that there were several letters that the DHO wrote to COW raising the red flag to the cow. Please note that Ntungamo as a district has had so many cows that come in and go out. They come in, they go out, come in, go out, come in and go out. But also, they had an HR at that time who has been there since 2014 up to now. They had the district finance officer or manager who has been there for the last 10 years. They had the district internal auditor who has been there for the last 10 years. So my question is, when you're preparing payroll has to go through different channels before it's signed off by the cow. The HR prepares the payroll. It goes through the chief finance officer. It then goes through the chief auditor, and then it comes through to the chief administrative officer who signs it off. And therefore, government releases money from the consolidated fund to pay people. When we studied the payroll further, we realized that there were teachers who were earning as medical workers. We realized that there are lab attendants who are working in a lab school, paid as lab attendants in a hospital. We also realized that there were people who were overly paid. You find someone who is supposed to earn 600,000 is actually earning 2 million, which is not acceptable. We also realized that the district had over-employed. I don't know if that word exists, but think about it. If you're supposed to have 3 health centers, 3 health center 4s, and you're having 24 health center 4s in the district, then it means that you're recruiting, and I think that there was decentralization. So we have the district district service commission. So you are employing all these people under all these health center 4s. Now, please note, a health center 4 has an average of must be about 149 staff. I don't know, but there are so many. So imagine you have all those health center 4s and you have to recruit all these people. That's why when you look at the wage bill of Ntungamo from 2012, between 2012 and 20, and this time, it just blows out. So you find that they over-recruited. They created employment and they over-recruited people. And that in a way affects service delivery. But also, we had Itojo Hospital, for example, that really operates as a fully fledged hospital, which I'm sure, Felix, you've seen and gone. But on the payroll, it's registered as Itojo Health Center 2. Now, that is crazy because Itojo Health Center 2, a health center 2 has to have a maximum of 9 to 10 staff. But you're having a hospital that is in public service seen as a health center 2. So then some of the explanations that the district people were telling me is that, look, where do you think we would get then staff to work in a hospital? Because people need services. So we had to improvise. Now, having discovered that, then I started to walk back in time to understand who actually introduced these ghost health centers on payroll. Is there someone, was someone in the district working, someone in public service to introduce these ghost centers so that these ghost centers actually are input into the system? What we did at the time was we started to look for sources. We wrote to the Ministry of Public Service that they did not come back to us, but we managed to get a source who actually spoke to us about inside public service about how these things came up. And this is going to be my last paragraph, Felix, because this is not a monologue. So I got we got a source who told us that back in 2013, government contracted a company called Free Balance, which is a company, it's in Canada. They have done so much work and you can look them up. Public Service, the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Health, there was supposed to be migration of the data from the old legacy system, which is the Uganda Computer Services, to the integrated personnel and payroll management system, which is the IPPS system. During the migration of the project, the Ministry of Public Service was supposed to work with the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Health, to stake up this data and look at, for example, Ntungamo district, these are the hospitals, these are the health center 4s, these are the health center 3s, these are the health center 2s, so that they migrate that data and put it up onto the new system. Now, the contractor did their job, they finished, they were given a certificate of completion, and they were paid their money, and the system has been like that since 2014. The question then becomes, was there complacency from the Ministry of Public Service to do quality assurance? Because once you give me a contract, you have to review what the work I've done, and upon which you will give me a certificate of completion. That did not happen. Now, this mess goes on for all this time. I'm sure public service knew that this mess was there. I don't know why they did not rectify it. Because it has taken 10 years that these things have been happening. And what is happening in Ntungamo is it exemplifies what could be happening in the whole country. We know that similar things are happening in Manafa. We know that similar things are happening in Adjumani. We know that similar things could be happening in Mukono district. And this is why I'm happy that since the investigation was released, the Ministry of Public Service is doing headcount verification of all staff. I know that there are people who have been told to return the money, and they have started a deduction, monthly deduction from their salaries to pay back. I know that ghost health workers have been deleted from the system. I know that people who died, we also found over 20 people who died, but they were still earning a salary. They're cleaning up the system. And that really speaks about the hemorrhage of public funds that would have otherwise been used to better the services of Ugandans in terms of healthcare, which are just gone to waste. So just thought of sharing what the story really was about and encourage people here who haven't watched it to go and watch the investigation. The investigation has caused national discussions in different circles. And it really has been an experience for me to know what really happens on the ground. When you're in Kampala, you may not perhaps understand what happens on the ground until when you go out of this city and have a real-time experience of what people go through. Over to you, Felix.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Solomon, for that detailed sharing of the experience and what really happened. In fact, for those of you who not yet watched the documentary, should definitely make time and watch it. It's available on the AIIJ YouTube channel. And just to bring it to speed a bit, Ntungamo has only 3 health center posts, and that is Kitwe, Rashamire, and Robari. So all the others, talking about the 20 plus, are ghost health centers. I think in there I saw Rakavengo which is apparently located in Rukunjiri, but it's on the Ntungamo payroll. There is Rakishikazi Health Center that's the ghost health center. Rakatojo, Ravarata, Rabawondo, Rakakwenda, Ramujo. The list goes on. So I encourage you to really make time and understand the gist of this documentary. But just to pick it up from there, Solomon, I understand. I don't know whether it ever crossed your mind that you are walking in a minefield, digging up information on the irregularities in terms of personnel and payroll management system at the district. In a district which is not an ordinary district, I may put it that way. What was running in your mind? Because that district in Ntungamo is not an ordinary district by far. Did you find yourself walking a journey where you had to be extra careful? Were there any challenges? Were there any threats? Someone would want to know what happened behind the scenes.
Thanks, Felix. So first of all, I think it's important for me to say that Ntungamo is a first district, and that's where the first lady comes from. The president has deep roots there. This country has produced so many of top government officials who are in Ntungamo. And so there was this perception that, I'm making the first district look terrible and look bad. And some of them thought I was deliberate about, making Ntungamo look bad. And that's not the point. The point was, these things existed and we wanted to find out how deep they go. When we were on the ground, people would not easily give you information. Everyone remained tight-lipped. Everyone remained tight-lipped. So I need to add that access to information was very difficult when we were doing this investigation. Even convincing those sources to be, to speak to me, and all that ambiguity that we created, they had to wear overalls. We had to convince them. Even after doing the interview, we had to preview with them to ensure that they are not seen. Otherwise, they were saying, once this goes out, we will be dead. The sources, the access to information. I'm glad that sometimes over the years doing investigations, it has earned me some sort of respect that people can trust you with some of this information. And, it was just walking on eggshells in there. But also what I saw in that district, when I asked some people, how come this has been going on for all this time? Why haven't you guys sorted it? And like every time you try to raise it, people will say that we have the president on fast dial. We have the first lady on speed dial. So someone, oh, Mama, Hachi, really, there is this person. So people fear to lose their jobs. And they say, you know what, we found it like this. Maybe this is how it's supposed to be. So some sort of influence peddling and, saying we have connections to the high office. So you cannot come from another district and come and think you can destabilize the things that have been here, So there was some sort of, even when some people within the district wanted to clear the system, you would feel that they were stopped by the system itself that has been built in Ntungamo. One of them told me it is what she told me, it is work to work in Ntungamo. That's what one of the sources told me. It is work to work in Ntungamo because you don't know. Actually, one of the sources who raised the red flag, their car was vandalized. They have death threats. All these things. It's just terrible. I know that the president, from close sources, has been presented with this investigation. I know that this investigation has got on the table of the First Lady, who has watched it. By the way, she was in Ntungamo, I think, a week ago. I know that there are conversations going on in Ntungamo. And I think that really goes. I know that the Inspectorate of Government, the IGG, has sent a team to investigate some of the issues that we found in the story. I know that the Office of the Auditor General has auditors on the ground for the last 2-3 weeks trying to present a report. I know that the State House Health Monitoring Unit is on the ground in Ntungamo to conclude their report, and they'll be submitting it to the president for review as well. I know that there's a cleanup in Ntungamo district, and hopefully, just hopefully, that this story has started a conversation that we should have as a country in terms of public service and in terms of mainstreaming our payroll. And I cannot wait to look at the impact and the fruits of this hard work, because it gets down to that. I always tell people that all of us in our different spaces take the risks to be able to make the country that we want to live in a better country. Yes, it's risky, and I know that many of my relatives have been calling me and telling me, "Munange, watch Totuleka, you should stop. You've earned it. There's nothing you're proving." Many of them have told me, "You have awards. You're a celebrated journalist. Everyone respects you. Just stop and maybe let other people also take over from where you've stopped." And they keep telling you, they receive messages from friends. One of my aunties called me and told me this, she has deep sources in places of power in the military, and I was like, and I'm like, that wasn't the point. That wasn't the point. The point was, I'm just trying to do storytelling. I'm just trying to put out these issues. Just before I stepped on set for this conversation, I found a former permanent secretary in one of the ministries who stood me up and told me, "I really appreciate the work that you do. I watched your Ntungamo investigation. I love the work that you put in. It was evidence-based. Naye, are you keeping safe?"
Yeah.
Then he told me, "I have been in this system long enough to know that there are people here who are benefiting from the system, and anything that looks like exposing them will lead them problems." So he told me, "I am your big fan. I am behind you. I believe in the noble work that you do as a journalist and as an investigative journalist, but you need to watch your back." So there's this semblance, a dark cloud that hovers over you, and it makes you paranoid. Every time you're driving, like, I cannot just drive direct to work or direct to town. I park somewhere, I get onto a border, get to do what I'm going to do, and then ask a friend to pick me up and then take me to my car, and then all those. So there are all these security protocols that we've designed that are supposed to really shock absorb us against the risks of that come with outputting a story that is sensitive like this. But it all goes down to this: what is our contribution? I think for me, that's where it all goes to. I'm a journalist. This is what I can do. As an accountant, what is your contribution? As a doctor, what is your contribution? As someone who sits in public service, what is your contribution? I think we always have this blanket statement that we want to make our country a better place, but we don't want to be part of it. I have friends who tell me, we see these things, but we decide to keep quiet because of our lives. But if you fear for your life, what is going to happen to your great-grandchildren? So there's always that, yes, knowing that you're walking on eggshells and you've rattled some feathers and all that, But Felix, as I summarize and conclude, I wanted to add that one of the things that keeps me safe, by the way, is I make sure that before the investigation is put out, it's watertight, it's evidence-based, so that the reaction, even to the culprits who do these things, is not, oh, let's eliminate him. No, it's what can we do? It's just like getting you and you're stealing. And I say, Felix, I have a video of you stealing. I think your first thing will not, oh, let me kill this guy. No. Your first thing is, how can we actually find a middle ground to it? So the foundation of any investigation is shaky if it's not grounded on evidence. And that evidence is supposed to really help you cover you up and shield you against possible harm. So one of the things that protects me, of course, it's God above all, but also too, the evidence that I use in my investigations. Felix?
Thank you. Indeed, you've rattled some feathers, but in a good way. It's a big contribution to the country. We hope and keep praying that you really stay safe. Let me just quickly a bit shift away from the actual crux or the central storyline of the documentary. I'm so sure that while you were shooting, there are other things that caught your eye. For many people out there, they imagine Ntungamo is that district that has everything in order. Probably has the service delivery gaps that are probably not as glaring as they are in other districts. Of course, because of the fact that the president has roots there, the first lady, that's the birthplace. So you imagine that almost it's not one of those districts that is suffering from many service delivery gaps. But I'm so sure when you were doing this documentary, there are things that caught your eye, probably that you want to share with the public to have to paint a picture of what Ntungamo is like. Is it like any other districts? Does it have the same challenges? Or it is one of those blessed districts, the favored ones?
I think if you look at the comments on the video and indeed on the Twitter conversations that we've had, many people from the West have been writing, "Oh, you guys thought that we from the West, are living in heaven, but we actually also have similar challenges." There are so many things that we did not include in that investigation that we saw, because anyway, when you're doing a story, you have to be laser focused. Otherwise, you lose the point of your story. You lose the direction of your story. One of the things that we did not include in that story, and something that we have on tape and we filmed, I'm actually scared to put it out now because then it may look like it's an attack on the First Lady's district or something. Maybe I'll get the courage one day to put it out. But for now, I want this to first of all fizzle out. But maybe I can share with you what we saw. Ntungamo, in that sub-county of Rashamire, they have a challenge with access to water. What we saw is that there is a stream that goes through that people are actually fetching water from. So you find kids with bottles fetching from a stream that is, as you may clearly see, contaminated, because there are cows drinking from the stream. Just next to the cows, you have a child who is having a small water bottle, getting water and drinking direct. There's a woman who is fetching water in a jerrycan, putting it on her head to go to use. Basically, it's kavuyo. When I talked to the LC3 chairperson, he said, "This is our main source of water." And I was heartbroken because there are some things we take for granted in Kampala, that you can open a tap and get water. But there are people who actually use water streams as sources of water. So I asked, has government put up any, like deep water holes to help you? And this guy told me they put up one, but it dried. So we don't have where to get water. For those that have money, they have to pay a border to go to the next sub-county to collect water. Now that is a big challenge. So access to water also remains very, 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 very important. The other thing is access to education.
Did you say education?
Yes, I think that
Yet the Minister of Education is from Ntungamo.
yes, there are so many challenges with access to education in Ntungamo. And one of the people I talked to said, look, the quality of education in those schools, the people of Ntungamo do not want to take their kids to private schools. So there's a guy who set up a private school, to public schools, sorry. There's a guy who set up a private school, and all the people there take the kids to the private school. It's only for the broke that take their kids to public schools. Now, Ntungamo as a district is a rich district. People there are hardworking. And that's the thing I envied. I'm like, my goodness, everyone has a plantation of bananas. Everyone has a cow or two. You know, they're not grass-thatched houses in Ntungamo. I did not see, at least in the sub-counties I saw. You know, they are not your typical village. You know, the people there have some money. But this person was telling me, actually I visited the private school and they told me we got so many first grades in last year, and you know our school fees is between 400 to 500,000 boarding. But he told me I'm already full. So I visited the public school, and you know there are a few kids in there, and teachers, whether they want to teach, there's heavy teacher absenteeism, there's, you know, which I think should change. Now, Ntungamo also has its unique challenges as a district, which I think, just like any other districts, need to really sort. We thought that decentralization will help bring services closer to people. Has it done that? Your guess is as good as mine. I think every district has its unique challenges. I mean, just look at our district of Kampala. Don't even go to Ntungamo. We have potholes everywhere. And this is the face of the city. Every road that we're driving on has potholes. Every road, literally, has potholes. But this is our district. This is the district which has a whole executive, which has a whole council, which has, you know, people who are earning fat salaries but driving on bad roads. You know, so public service delivery, even for us in the city, is really challenging. So I think that Ntungamo, and indeed the western part of the country, has challenges that we also face. In Buganda, there may be worse challenges in Zombo, or worse challenges in Karamoja, but we need to pay attention to public service. Public service. Let me give you a short positive story as I wrap up, Felix. My grandmother passed on yesterday, and she's been battling liver cancer. She passed on in Chirudu, at Chirudu Hospital, which is located along Salama Munyonyo Road. I think that's Machinge Division.
Yeah.
So she has been there. What I have seen is public service at its best. Not even because maybe, oh, Solomon Seranja is a celebrity, is a journalist, what is he doing here? You know, maybe we attend to him, and you know. I went to the emergency ward and I was amazed at the hard work that medical people are doing. I was amazed at the level of cleanliness at Chirudu Hospital. I was amazed at the level of order. If you're going to the pharmacy, there are chairs there, and they queue. They call you, and then you know, there's someone who is ushering you. Next is you. Next is you. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it that Chirudu Hospital is offering all these services. And you know, my aunties were telling me we have been using some of the most expensive medicines if you've had a liver patient, you know that albumin is very expensive as a drug. And we were not paying a single coin. And I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. Even when she passed on, we just paid for, you know, because we're in a VIP suite, so we just paid for, you know, accommodation, which is fair enough because we've been using power, we've been using water, and we went into the VIP section. But I was amazed at how public service has changed in Chirudo Hospital. Right from the gate, where, you know, you come and the askaris greet you, you register in the book, they find you parking. You know, when you're walking through, you know, the reception area, it's just amazing what I experienced firsthand. And I think this is the second place I've seen public service at this place. I think the first one was the dental department at Mulago Hospital. The dental unit is absolutely organized and they provide state-of-the-art services and they work on so many people. I think this is what public service should be. So what can we do in our different little spaces to actually improve public service? Because you pay taxes, because we pay salaries, because imagine my salary, I get off money and I pay taxes. Every consultancy I do, they talk of withholding fee. You know, we pay taxes, and that means that we deserve better. But the thing is that we need to stand up and demand for these services. I think that for me is the thing that Ugandans, I don't know what we have as a problem as Ugandans. That sometimes we say like, tituna chakola munange ebintu ebityo abasajja tembogerako mubaleke, you know. Basically, we live in this world. I've seen some men like Henry who are uncomfortable with things going on. You know, he just says, no, these things cannot be going on like this as a country. And those are people who are actually intimidated by the state, or, you know, or scared and all that. Imagine a level of, I've just done a story and everyone is worried about my life. Can you imagine? So we have resigned from our responsibility as citizens of this country to demand for better service delivery, you know. And don't expect a Muzungu to come from there to clean up your house. No, it's going to take us to get annoyed about public service delivery in this country, that we get uncomfortable about it, so that we can be able to get better services because we actually deserve them. I've traveled the world, Felix. I have in Africa, and in Europe, in the Americans, everywhere. There is a dedicated, you know, people have to come up with a resolve that we need something. You cannot believe that government officials drive Benzes and they drive X5s and all these big cars on bad roads. It's just absolutely annoying, you know, that you have a speaker who actually, last year alone, I was mad that we spent 2.6 billion shillings to buy 2 cars. 2 goddamn cars for the speaker and the deputy speaker. Like, what is that? You know, and then you're like, tubareke munange, you know, and I did that, and I asked Parliament, how could you, I asked Minister of Finance, so you allocated 2.6 billion shillings to buy cars? And like, oh yes, we did because Parliament budgeted for it. What do you mean Parliament budgeted for it? What do you mean that the Treasury actually released 2.6 billion shillings to buy cars? 2.6 billion shillings.
I hear you. I hear you, Solomon. I hear your anger on that one. And I'm glad that you are among the many that are using your talent, using your space, using your influence to make a difference. Indeed, I think the clarion call is that each one of us can do something in our own space to make Uganda a better place. Our time is running fast, but I have a couple of questions that I want us to discuss. One of them is around the fact that it's quite interesting, because I think even somewhere in the documentary, one of the respondents, I think it was the Action Aid country directors, Xavier Joy, who partly hinted on it and said that when you start to see people not fearing to steal from places that are difficult to steal from. You just imagine if someone is stealing from CPS. That's quite a bold act. So what's your take? Should we say, do you get the sense that probably the corrupt are becoming more bold and they don't fear where to steal from, respective? What's your take?
My thought is that I don't feel like this government is really serious on fighting corruption. And I'm sorry, because we have all these agencies. We have the IGG's office. We have the Office of the Auditor General. We have the Anti-Corruption Court. We have the State House Health Monitoring Unit. We have the high-level forum to fight corruption by the ministers. You remember when they were asking for money, that we want a budget. Imagine they came up with a high-level forum for ministers to fight corruption. All these agencies have been put there. What? I feel that this country needs a radical shift.
Do you think?
2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, President Paul Kagame arrested and put a minister to prison for accepting a bribe of $200. $200. Chikumi bibiri, 200 is in jail right now.
Yet those behind them are still enjoying the offices and the privileges.
I mean, the DPP dropped the charges. Think about that. Even with the overwhelming evidence, the DPP.
You think you mentioned that the heads are starting to roll in Ntungamo, but at the same time you don't believe that it will head. You think you believe at some point that probably something will happen in Ntungamo that will have a ripple effect elsewhere in other districts?
No, I think that already there's some stuff that is happening. Think about sometimes just doing things for cameras and for the show is that they are not sustainable. So I want to see, something that is, of course, it's going to be big. Everyone, I know that government is starting the migration of the data from the integrated personnel and payroll management system to the human capital management system, and they have started that migration. So if public service is really, really serious about cleaning up this mess, otherwise we will find that this mess will end up onto the new system. So I believe that if we are committed to actually closing some of these loopholes and make things work, this country will be a better place. But it takes political leadership. The buck stops with you as a father. Omwana tasobola kujja n'afuka mu ntebe n'omugamba bambi. No, you can't.
Yeah.
You can accommodate that for when the kid is maybe 1 year, or he's saying, okay, maybe he's just trying to. The moment they clock 1.5 years or 2 years, tosobola kufuka mu ntebe n'enkuleka. I beat you up. I say, otherwise, next time when guests come, that kid will come and wee in the chairs.
Yes.
They will look at us. Imagine you come to my house and then what impression do you come up with?
Sure.
The buck has to stop with leadership. And that's why I'm saying that the president should be solely held accountable for the mishaps that are happening here. The buck stops with him. And that's why I asked the State House Monitoring Unit executive director. I said, Dr. Namara, the president should be held accountable. And he laughed it off and said, no, it's not the president. It's the people around him. But if the people around him are not delivering, then they should be held accountable themselves. And so that he can sack them and put in people who are delivering.
Wow, interesting.
For me, at the end of it, if we fail to put accountability and blame on leadership, then we're losing it. It takes political leadership to fight corruption. There must be a political willingness to actually fight corruption, or there must be a political willingness to provide better services. And that means you have to put penalties to getting things wrong and reward to getting things right. My children know that in case they do anything wrong, mommy will beat them up. It is that simple. If you do something right, daddy will reward you, which is good, because daddy rewards, mommy beats. That, but there must be some sort of accountability.
Okay.
You do something has to be done, and I think Henry calls it shifting the needle.
Yes. Thank you. I just have, I think, enough time for about one question, which I've been looking at the views on that documentary on your channel, the AIJ channel. I think in less than 24 hours, the first time it premiered on the 20th of July, quickly the views were around 8,000 views, and as we speak now, it's over around 49,000 views. What makes this documentary unique to attract such interest within the public?
So I think that we need to study the dynamics of the audience. The dynamics are changing. Before, we used to fight for television, mainstream media. Oh, please, oh, please. No, now the internet has leveled the ground. You can actually do good content and people consume it and people interact with it. That same video on TikTok has over 20,000 views. That same video on YouTube, on Instagram has so many views. So when you compound all those views, it gets about 60 to 70,000 people who have consumed that content and have interacted with it. The audience is online. People want to leverage on the power of the internet to actively participate in the way they are governed, right? And that means that we need to leverage on that, what the internet has brought with it. It's no longer social media. It is now virtual reality, that a story that you put on YouTube can actually push the Auditor General to send auditors, that can actually push the IGG to send teams, that can actually shift the needle, that you have people talking in their closed circles. And in these closed circles are people who are supposed to contribute to the change. So it is real. I think that's where it is going. But also, it speaks about the power of investigative journalism. Just that one story could have a ripple effect that could change the course of history for this country. And that speaks about, the quality of investigation, moving away from the petty journalism to actually do evidence-based investigations, and the hard work of doing this story. So, and also, I always, tell the people I'm training or the people that I talk to, is that journalism is about people. When you remove people from journalism, you're making noise. It's just noise. And I always tell people that whichever stories that we do, we need to be mindful. Why should the audience care that you're doing that story? Right? Why should the audience care? And we need to answer that question as journalists. I'm doing this story because we are losing money, because the services are not good. And that is the need for me to do this story. So it speaks to, journalism and its role in contributing to the change that we want in this society. And also bringing in people to actually interact with that content and be part of the cause. Journalism can rally community. Journalism can rally a generation to stand up and demand for what they want.
Great. Okay, that's Solomon Saranja. In your parting shots, what do you think? You've partly touched it, but part of your parting shots, what you think the citizens, what is their role? What should the citizens do with this information that you've been so generous to put out there? What next? You've done your part. What about the viewer, someone who has watched it? What do you want them to do?
Ugandans forget very fast. We always love to move on to new things, so what's the next big thing in town? Maybe because we never run out of scandals. The Iron Sheet scandal has since phased out. I don't think if you opened the Daily last week, you found any story around the Iron Sheet scandal. We have since moved on. I think that's the complacency that we need to stop. We need to reserve, and I think it's a role of civil society to reawaken these conversations. The Mabati scandal passed on like that, and we've since moved on. It's a role of civil society to reawaken government and say, look, it is not over until it's over. What happened to the Iron Sheik scandal? Can we revisit it? What happened to the Ntungamo scandal? Can we revisit it? You know, what were the actions that were taken? Can we push government? Can we make government uncomfortable? Can we give them sleepless nights, be in their faces to actually account for this country? You know, I want the president to address this country to talk about what happened in Ntungamo or what happened in the Iron Sheik scandal, to come out and show his leadership that this is what we're doing about it. This is why we're getting serious about this. You know, and so for me, I think that all of us have a role. If you're an accountant, leak this information to the journalists. If you're a doctor, provide this intel. You know, let's work together to make our country a better place.
Right, there you have it, the last words of Solomon Saranja. And just keeping a bit, you gave a success story of Chirudu, but the Chirudu you see is as a result. I remember there was a time when Chirudu was in the press over social media for the wrong reasons. I think they took the feedback well, and they're improving, giving your feedback on how they have been treating your patient. So it's important that all of us, we put out these things that don't necessarily make Uganda a better place. We report on them, we talk about them, we hold the leaders accountable, and those small acts will eventually turn into big changes that we are looking for. That was Solomon Saranja, who is the award-winning investigative journalist, and is also the executive director of the African Institute for Investigative Journalism, AIIJ. He's also the lead investigator behind the documentary, the Untold, the Ghosts of Ntungamo. Like we said, it's this documentary is, you can, if you don't yet watched it, you can watch it on the AIIJ YouTube channel, and you should be able to understand what's the crux of the matter that we've been discussing. Solomon, thank you so much for making the time, for sharing out your heart, your experience, and for the work you're doing. We really do appreciate, and thank you for being part of this conversation. And my name is Felix Kafuma, who was the host for the show, and allow me to bring it to the close. Until next time, bye-bye, take care, God bless.
We have spent 6 months digging, reviewed tens of documents, spoken to officials to uncover what really is behind the ghost health centers of Ntungamo district.
Going to a press called Wabarata, but in that area there is not even a drug shop.
We think we have the smoking gun.
Is there in your community a health center called Wabarata Health Center 4?
No, we have the village sale.
These people are on the payment side, but they don't appear on the payment.
For years, the district has been operating with over 20 ghost health centers with people paid on government payroll. Yet the residents are not aware of these health centers.
Konkara Wabarata Health Center 4 Mujimani. Tena yangu jamanya.
It never existed during my time of work.
Government has lost billions of shillings through this financial hemorrhage.
But they are the ones that constructed this company, and they shouldn't have paid this company.
We now know who is responsible for manipulating the system. We cast a spotlight on the ghosts of Ntungamo.